Within the last couple of months, we've gathered different information throughout the organization on our Culture of Safety Action Plan. Thank you to all of you who have responded, and this event today was to go through all of the results and bring in a process flow from our patient from start to finish. As you can see, we brought in to our event this morning all of the Culture of Safety Action Plan information so that we can make sure we're incorporating this into our process flow. Today what we did is we started with the scope of direct admits as well as ED admits and following a patient from start to end throughout our hospital and all of the touch points and handoffs that happen throughout that process. What we'd like to see from you today is feedback from the process as it stands and the overall process flow that we've put together. There is a SurveyMonkey survey that's attached in this email, so please provide your information in there. If you'd like to see this process as well, it's in conference room 1, so feel free to stop by, take some notes, look at the process, and leave any feedback. We'll have some charts up for your feedback to give us. We will be meeting again next week, so that's our goal, is to get feedback from all of you throughout this upcoming week. To start with our process, we focused into several different areas. We have admission, transfer, in-unit, and other departments. What you see here for admission is we have direct admits as well as ED admits. As we talk about admission through direct admits, we're going to go through that process first. What I'm going to be doing is going through the bigger Post-its, which are a step throughout the process, and then talking to the little small sticky notes. Those small sticky notes are opportunities or issues that our group has determined have been a big issue for our effective handoff and communications between steps. So those are the stickies that we're going to want feedback on, as well as what should be added to each of these steps. So to start with direct admit, the house soup receives a call that a patient needs to be admitted. The house soup gives the caller the pager number for the admitting physician. There's the MD to MD report. An issue we've seen here is consult status, orders and communication. Then we have MD accepts admission and notifies the house soup. House soup assigns room and notifies charge RN. An issue we identified here was the charge RN is not available, whether that's because they're busy with another patient or just not at the nurse's station. There's a change, our charge RN assigns the patient to the nurse. The caller gives report to the nurse. So an issue that we found here is that this doesn't happen as often as it should. So there could be no report from the clinic, or the nurse also only knows the diagnosis and no details. So something that we talked about was the overall story of the patient. Sometimes it's really hard to understand the status of the patient if you only have a diagnosis. From there, the patient arrives directly to the unit, and then we segue into some process flow that's within the unit. What we have here is the RN notifies the MD that the patient is in the room if there are no orders. Some issues we identified here is to account for the personal belongings of the patient, med history by the pharmacy tech, and then initial report to CNA is lacking details, or they don't have the information to even give the CNA. From there, we have assess the patient, review the chart, get vitals, coordinate patient belongings, and then we move into different activities that happen throughout the patient's stay. So we have the patient stays in their room, which one of the issues we identified there for the overall patient stay is there's multiple ways of communication. This feedback was also given on that culture of safety boards as well. So that was in 2 places, but multiple ways of communication. Implementing the orders, so waiting for meds to be verified, unsure if meds were given in the ED, lab orders missed or repeated. For OFTs, issues that we've identified are overall attendance of the OFTs, discharging info, and then waiting for specialty. For MD rounding, some issues we identified were copied notes are inaccurate or don't have the right information. Don't know the plan of care or barriers to discharge. This is with regards to the nurse coming to OFTs to discuss the patient. They may not have all those details available. New physicians, sometimes we don't even know who to contact if we need to contact them, just of them having new physicians. Specialist communication, and the notes can sometimes come in a little later than what's needed. MD does not round in the morning or does not talk to the nurse in time. That's where we left off. Next week, where we're going to be focusing is with other departments. So we started a few departments here. We know that there's more, but we're going to be diving into that next week. So there will be a video about that too, to solicit feedback from all of you. So our scope for this email is really up until here. So that's where we are, but I'm going to go back and then start from the very beginning to go through the ED admit, which then follows into the same process flow. So if you have a patient that's admitted from the ED, our first step that we have is the ED-MD talks to the house soup about admitting the patient. The house soup looks up patient in diagnosis and determines the appropriate placement. House soup assigns room and notifies the charge RN. An issue we identified here was the same problem about only receiving a diagnosis and not really the overall holistic story about the patient. We have the charge RN assigns the patient to the nurse. The assigned RN calls the ED for report within 15 minutes. An issue we found here was workflow timing between the ED and the unit. So the workflows are fundamentally different. So having that time match up where it's easiest for those two groups to communicate is very challenging. Then we have patient transferred to the unit. So the first issue we identified here, this is more of a patient safety issue, is that patient can change in acuity while they're in the process of being transferred. Waiting for a clean room has been identified as an issue, so that can really delay the process. The MD in the room while trying to transfer, so the MD might be assessing the patient, and so it offsets the workflow to transfer that patient. Waiting for tele. ED, RN, or tech waiting for receiving RN or CNA to come to the room, so waiting for them so they can leave. Receiving RN or CNA not aware that the patient arrived, so that's a dual problems there, is waiting for each other. And then we have them transitioning back into the in-unit, which is the information there. Concurrently with this process, we have the ED and MD talks to the ED-MD talks to the hospitalist. And an issue that we identified here is consult status, orders, and communication back and forth. MD reviews the chart, sees the patient, places the orders, and this could be either in the ED or in the unit. And then while that patient is in their room in the ED, patient access collects information from the patient, consent, insurance, and the contact information. So something we identified here that could be an issue is just the wrong info in general. So that's what we have for our first section of this project for our overall patient flow. We spent about an hour and a half this morning going through all this information. So we definitely know that there's a lack of things that should be added to this. So that's why we would please like your feedback in the attached survey.